Yesterday, I buried my grandfather. I know it's a strange way to introduce a topic, but it felt fitting for a discussion on death. I preached a sermon at his funeral on the value of hope, a topic for another day. But it struck me throughout the planning and the lead up how little we in the West actually come face to face with death, and how abnormal and strange that is, historically speaking. My cousin remarked that she had never seen a casket in person. Earlier this year, I did a 12-week intensive practicum, working as an on-call chaplain for a major hospital. I was flung from the comfortable, naive Western world into one of the only places in our society that actually still confronts death head-on, and it was interesting to say the least. It's hard to oversell just how averse to death we are as a society, but it's no surprise when you think about it. Death is the ultimate absolute that spits in the face of a culture that pretends that absolutes don't actually exist. Truth is subjective and reality malleable until death comes knocking. You can't pretend anymore. I operate from a Christ-centered worldview, so I imagine that my experiences and perspectives on death may strike some of you as odd. Death, for the Christian, is many things at once. It's the culmination of a life lived. It's a metaphor for how we are to live that life. It's an end, it's a beginning. It's a gateway into a better tomorrow, and yet death itself is not to be desired so much as what naturally follows it, what lies on the other side. It represents an opportunity to join with the church throughout history and to experience our relationship with God in a whole new way. Though, despite the generally positive nature of most of these attributes I've listed, I don't want anyone to think that it lacks gravity, weight, and sadness. These things, of course, are still expected and natural and certainly very familiar for me. I mean, the Book of Lamentations is essentially an entire book of the Bible on mourning and grieving and death and suffering. But I wanted to talk about it because I think the culture at large has a very low view of death, probably because we've become so desensitized to it in certain contexts. It's strange to think about, really, but how many of you watching have ever actually seen a dead body in real life, touched one? And yet, how many of us have watched horrible deaths actually occur in front of our eyes through some sort of screen? When Kirk was assassinated, how many people actually watched it happen on socials? We distance ourselves and become numb to the intensity of it, while also avoiding any real or actual confrontation of the reality of it. It's backwards. I say this because in many ways I view the world through the lens of tension and release. Without tension, the release or resolution loses its meaning and importance. And I think we've done the same thing with death and life. Because we consistently cheapen the impact of death, we invariably cheapen the impact of life. I remember earlier this year, I had the privilege of attending the graduation of an inner healing / group therapy sort of ministry at our church. And I listened to the story of a mother who is well known to me talk about what brought her to that place. Her family had been through a brutal amount of suffering over the past few years, some of which I had witnessed and supported her son and daughter through. She talked about how the death of her young niece tore their family apart, and how she thought that that would be the end of it. But somehow, bad things just kept happening as the years wore on. She talked about how this all broke her down and required a choice from her. A choice between despair or turning back to God. This public declaration, after a long year of work, that healing program is not easy, marked one of those moments in life where we see just how beautiful this life can be if we learn to accept our suffering. If we learn to make peace with death and still turn back to God, something astounding happens. I say this as one of the hundreds of people in that room that day. No one unaffected by her story. Not a single eye was dry in that room. We all understood that the death around her was crushing. And yet we could see just how this tension in her life was resolved when she turned back towards her Savior. As I process my thoughts on death and write this, I am reminded of one of my favorite scenes in the MCU. The scene between Vision and that final Ultron body. Ultron's about to die, and he and Vision have a short discussion on death and life and their respective meanings, and Vision says something profound. A thing isn't beautiful because it lasts. A flower fades, a bird dies. One of the defining characteristics of life is that it changes, it moves, it pulls and pushes, and part of the reason why we assign the term beautiful to it is because of that fact. The fact that life cannot stay where it is. To be frank, I do not know how to offer hope to those outside Christ. I personally have found no other rational source of optimism in this life other than the eternal security that is afforded to me as a result of submission to Jesus Christ. It's the reason I can look at the world and not be crushed by the weight of suffering and death. I do know, however, that viewing death in its proper place as something which lends meaning to life, something which acts as the foil to life, is, in my estimation, the best way of thinking about it. Just some thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. Hope this helps someone. Thanks for listening.